March 1993, a 47-year-old woman, Jean Bradley, vibrant, successful, loved by everyone, walks to her parked car after work. She opens the door, sets down her bag, and in an instant, horror erupts. A stranger attacks from behind. No warning, no words, no robbery, just 8 savage stabs from an 8-inch blade straight into her torso, piercing her lung. But the killer flees. A Brave Carpenter chases him over a mile through the street. Witnesses see him, tall, gaunt, pale, wearing a bizarre black sou'wester hat like a bin liner, but he vanishes into the night. Who was the man in the hat, and why did he choose Jean Bradley? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Jean Bradley entered the world in 1946, growing into a woman whose infectious warmth and lively spirit left a lasting impression on all who knew her. She shared a comfortable £200,000 detached house on Pine Ridge in the quiet village of Crowthorne, Berkshire, with her devoted long-term partner Nicholas Osborne. Jean was vivacious and genuinely popular, the kind of person who brightened rooms and conversations alike. A passionate gardener, she could often be seen in the summer months jubilantly tending to her plants and flowers, humming softly as she worked the soil underneath the warm sun. Neighbors adored her. Evenings were filled with casual back-and-forth dinners, laughter spilling from open doors and shared gardens. She stayed especially close to her only close relative, her brother David, 6 years older and working as a computer systems manager at the time, a steady anchor in her life. And it was in the early 1970s that Jean had met and fell deeply in love with Nick, who was 5 years younger than her. Their connection ignited almost immediately after she first spotted him in a cozy pub near Hampton Court. From that chance encounter, the relationship blossomed rapidly into something profound and enduring. Nick, a respected history master at Felsted, one of England's most prestigious public schools in Essex, became the love of her life. After more than 21 years together, the couple had begun making serious plans to marry, envisioning a shared future filled with travel and quiet happiness. Jean's professional journey mirrored her adventurous, adaptable nature. She had started her career as an air stewardess with British Airways, eventually earning a coveted spot on the Queen's flight, a highly prestigious assignment that involved royal travel and brought her into direct personal contact with the Queen herself. From those glamorous skies, she moved into estate agency work, and then in 1991 made yet another confident career pivot, stepping into the role of operations manager at PRICOA Relocation Management. This American firm specialized in guiding companies through complex office relocations, and Jean thrived in the fast-paced environment. Her office was located on the elegant new Bond Street in central London, a commute that had begun to weigh on her. In the lead-up to her death, Jean had grown increasingly anxious about the safety of her cherished new BMW during those long drives into the city. Determined to avoid the chaos of central London traffic and to protect her prized car from dings, scratches, or worse, she developed a practical workaround, parking in a quiet residential street and completing the rest of the journey by public transport. She had settled on Carbery Avenue in Acton, West London to park her car, a genuine neighborhood watch area lined with charming mock Tudor homes and tall leafy trees that offered shade and a sense of calm seclusion. Apart from the rare burglary, the street had never known violent crime of any kind, certainly nothing approaching murder. It felt secure, almost idyllic, the ideal place to leave her K-Reg BMW while she walked the short distance to nearby Acton Town station, where she would catch the Piccadilly line into the heart of the city. On the Sunday before her murder, Jean spoke with Nick for what would tragically be the final time. He was away in Rome, chaperoning a group of his sixth form students on an educational trip, but Jean had asked him to keep an eye out for romantic spots they could visit together during their own planned holiday to Rome in the coming weeks, a getaway they were both looking forward to with genuine excitement. On the morning of March 25, 1993, Jean set off from her Crowthorne home as usual, driving to Carbery Avenue in Acton and parking her BMW at approximately 7:30 a.m. She then walked the usual short distance to Acton Town station. There, she boarded the Piccadilly line and travelled to her New Bond Street office. The day at her relocation management firm unfolded in its typical busyness, productive rhythms. There were no unusual incidents, no red flags, nothing out of the ordinary to report. By 6:45 p.m., Jean had stayed a little longer than usual to complete some paperwork, then said a cheerful goodbye to her boss and walked to Green Park Station. From there, she took the Piccadilly line back toward Acton Town Station. At approximately 7:20 p.m., as her train arrived at Acton, Jean stepped into the station kiosk and purchased 2 cans of Diet Coke before setting off on the roughly 10-minute walk back to her parked car on Carbery Avenue. One other commuter would later confirm that they had remembered passing her in Gunnersbury Gardens and noting that the street was otherwise deserted, no one else in sight, the evening calm and unremarkable. At precisely 7:30 p.m., as Jean reached her BMW, opened the door, and placed her bag and the 2 cans of Diet Coke on the back seat, a man suddenly lunged from behind in what appeared to be a completely random, opportunistic assault. Armed with an 8-inch blade, likely a butcher's or carving knife, he stabbed her 8 times, inflicting devastating wounds to her torso, with at least one puncturing a lung. Jean screamed in terror and fought back with fierce determination, suffering defensive cuts to her hands as she struggled to seize the knife from the attacker. The ferocious attack lasted only seconds. Shockingly, the killer said nothing to her and showed no interest in theft. Her handbag had remained untouched in the back seat. The killer had forced Jean to stagger a few yards along the pavement before the assault was interrupted by Patrick Cunningham, a carpenter who had just driven past in his van and slammed on the brakes the instant he witnessed the struggle. At the same moment, a mother driving down Carbery Avenue with her son in their escort caught sight of the man and instantly felt unease. His gait and purposeful stride seemed all wrong. She described him as tall, taking long strides but not quite running. What stood out most was the ridiculous hat he wore, resembling a sou'wester, an odd choice for that part of the world, especially on a dry evening. Though unaware of the stabbing itself, the mother and son decided to trail him from a safe distance because his behavior screamed suspicion. Moments after the assault erupted, Patrick Cunningham, a compact 5'4" Irishman, 35 years old, halted his van in Gunnersbury Gardens, briefly blocking the killer's path, and charged toward the much taller 6-foot suspect on foot. He shouted defiantly, "You attacked a woman, now attack a man," challenging the killer to turn and fight him instead. At that instant, Patrick had no idea how gravely injured the woman lay dying farther up the road. The killer responded with chilling threats, "I'll have you, and you will get it as well," while raising something clutched tightly inside a black plastic bag. But Cunningham refused to back down and pressed the pursuit. Later, Patrick would describe the man as eerily calm, not panicked in the slightest, and radiating an unmistakable aura of evil. What then followed was a desperate 1.5-mile chase through the streets of West London. Cunningham tracked the suspect from Gunnersbury Garden into Gunnersbury Lane, then right onto Bolo Lane. There, he crossed paths with the mother from the escort who had been shadowing the man herself. Breathlessly, Cunningham told her the suspect had attacked a woman and begged her to phone the police immediately. She had already dropped her son at home to make the call and now hurried back to confirm it had been done. Meanwhile, back on Carbery Avenue, the piercing screams had drawn half a dozen neighbors rushing from their homes to help. One man, together with his mother, had heard the cries and peered out, initially assuming it was a mugging. They ran to Jean's side and found her collapsed, blood streaming from her nose. In her final moments, she managed only 3 words: "Call an ambulance." Her breathing grew labored and ragged, and then, heartbreakingly, it stopped. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes and fought valiantly to revive her, but Jean Bradley died right there on the pavement of Carbery Avenue. Nearly a mile away, Patrick Cunningham refused to give up the chase. At one point, in sheer frustration, he grabbed a nearby bin and hurled it at the fleeing man, striking him in the ankles, yet the killer pressed on without breaking stride. Cunningham repeatedly shouted for help from passers-by, yelling that the man ahead had attacked a woman, but no one stepped in to assist. In one especially frustrating moment, he flagged down a Rastafarian man driving a white GTI Golf convertible and pleaded for a lift or intervention, but the driver refused and drove away. Undeterred and increasingly desperate, Cunningham kept running. By approximately 7:45 p.m., the pursuit had wound its way to the South Acton estate, threading through Osborne Road, Hanbury Road, and a left turn onto Bolo Bridge Road. Here, the killer abruptly slowed to a casual, non-urgent walk, blending in as scores of people passed by him and his pursuer on the estate paths. But once they emerged on the far side, the chase reignited, and Cunningham observed that the man was clearly very unfit. The telltale sign came near a recreational park. Confronted with a low railing, the killer chose to detour around it rather than jump, reinforcing the impression of flat-footed clumsiness or physical limitation. As they barreled towards Church Road, an oncoming car sped around the corner, forcing Cunningham to brake and momentarily lose ground. When he recovered and rounded the bend onto Ragley Close outside the Prince of Wales pub, the killer had vanished from sight. But a resident watching from a high vantage point in a nearby flat witnessed the entire scene unfold below. He saw the man duck into a doorway on Ragley Close, pacing nervously back and forth as if hiding. Sensing danger, the resident watched as the suspect removed his peculiar black sou'wester hat, shiny and strange, resembling a black bin liner on a perfectly dry night, revealing jet black hair beneath. After a brief pause, the man continued fleeing on foot. From above, the resident could clearly see the three-quarter-length Parker coat, the black trousers that were visibly too short and flapping loosely around the ankles, and the unmistakable flat-footed gait. He noted how the killer appeared to scan frantically for an exit route from the estate, potentially suggesting he may not have known the area well. The suspect was last glimpsed walking up Buckland Walk in the direction of Acton High Street. In all, 7 separate witnesses caught sight of him during the prolonged chase. From those accounts, police compiled a vivid description: a white male in his late 30s or early 40s, approximately 6 feet tall, gaunt and angular, with prominent cheekbones and a large nose, pale complexion with about 2 days' growth of stubble, slim build and a distinctive flat-footed gait. He looked disheveled overall, possibly struggling with mental health issues, drug use or alcohol dependency. His outfit gave the impression of items gathered from charity shops. Back at the crime scene, police swiftly cordoned off Carbery Avenue and launched a thorough forensic sweep of the car, the surrounding pavement, and Jean's body. There were no signs whatsoever of sexual assault. Aside from the victim's blood at the scene, forensics experts did manage to find and collect a separate blood sample, possibly of the killer's, indicating he may have injured himself during the assault. Robbery had clearly not been the motive, given her handbag sat undisturbed on the back seat. Everything pointed to a completely random, senseless attack. Further inquiries would confirm that Jean had no known enemies, no recent disputes or conflicts with anyone. As is standard procedure, her boyfriend Nick would be questioned, but he was quickly and definitively ruled out. He had been in Rome during the time of the murder, making his alibi airtight. The Metropolitan Police responded with full force, launching a major murder investigation and setting up a mobile incident room right on Ragley Close. Among the earliest finds was a floral-patterned plastic fragment measuring about 8 to 9 inches in diameter, torn from a black carrier bag branded Narcissus. This was believed to be the very bag the killer had used to conceal his bloodied knife. Forensic experts traced the branding to a now-defunct manufacturer of plastic bags and carriers based in Ayrshire, Scotland. The item was far from a standard high street carrier, but appeared to be a specialist or wholesale product distributed in limited runs to select businesses or retailers before the manufacturing company had ceased operations in 1990. Detectives concluded almost immediately that Jean had torn this piece free during her desperate struggle to defend herself. 40 dedicated officers were assigned to the inquiry, carrying out 150 meticulous house-to-house inquiries in the immediate surrounding streets. Public appeals deliberately targeted psychiatric services, mental health professionals, drug and alcohol support workers, anyone who might recognize this unstable, disheveled figure described by the witnesses. Investigators also moved quickly to notify Jean's partner. They managed to telephone Nick Osborne in Rome just as his group were preparing to board their flight back to Gatwick. Upon landing, detectives were waiting at the airport to meet him, then they questioned him, and then they drove him to Felsted so he could collect his own car and return to their now unbearably empty home in Crowthorne. The grief devastated him. He developed severe mental health struggles, including a noticeable stutter, and his cigarette consumption doubled to 40 a day. In a raw, emotional interview months later, Nick spoke movingly of how he had worshipped the ground Jean worked on, of their shared dreams of imminent marriage, and of the profound heartbreak that had left him shattered. Early in the investigation, detectives scrutinized possible links to the still unsolved murder of Penny Bell, which had occurred just 3 miles away in Greenford nearly 2 years earlier. 2 women of similar age and professional success, both owners of high-end cars, both stabbed viciously in or near their vehicles in public settings, both with their handbags left untouched in the back seats, and neither showing signs of assault or robbery. On March 26, Scotland Yard issued a public appeal for assistance in Jean's murder, pleading with any witnesses or passers-by in the area to come forward. They had already detained and rigorously interviewed a local man previously known for pestering women nearby, but he was soon eliminated and released without charge. The following day on March 27th, officers recovered what was believed to be the murder weapon itself, discarded in nearby Meon Road. It is then taken to the forensics laboratory for testing. On March 30th, Scotland Yard released an artist's sketch of the gaunt suspect to the press and television. In the days that followed, the incident room was inundated with calls from members of the public offering possible identifications and leads based on the image. That same day, police publicly ruled out any direct connection between the Jean Brantley and Penny Bell murder cases. While they acknowledged the surface similarities, investigators concluded that Jean had fallen victim to an opportunistic, random attacker, unlike Penny Bell's murderer, who is thought to have been somebody she knew. On April 1st, police then staged a full reconstruction of the murder on Carbery Avenue itself, using a local Acton woman who bore a striking resemblance to Jean. This event proved highly effective. Over 40 witnesses then came forward in the immediate aftermath, reporting that they had personally observed the suspect during his escape and the chase. On April 15th, the BBC's flagship program, Crimewatch, aired a detailed segment devoted entirely to Jean Brantley's murder. Viewed by millions, the public responded with more than 200 tips, several of which being described by detectives as genuinely promising. The following day, on April 16th, Jean's employer, PRICOA Relocation Management, announced a £20,000 reward for any information leading directly to the arrest and conviction of Jean's killer. On the 28th of April, police renewed their public appeal, this time zeroing in on the distinctive Narcissus branded plastic bag from the defunct Ayrshire manufacturer. They stressed that a piece of the bag had been recovered at the scene, torn off, likely by Jean herself in her courageous fight for survival, and asked anyone who recognized the unusual carrier to come forward. But nobody would. On the 2nd of May, reports surfaced of a man matching the description of Jean's killer who had allegedly been stalking multiple women across the London Underground network. Detectives, who had informally dubbed this figure the Underground Stalker, revealed that Jean's assailant had reportedly been loitering around Acton Town station for as long as 2 hours before following her to her car and launching the fatal attack. By July of 1993, the investigation team had narrowed their focus to a smaller group of hardcore suspects, distilled from an initial pool of some 400 individuals traced across the country and beyond its borders. Most had been eliminated through alibi checks or other evidence, but the remaining names were placed in carefully arranged identity parades, where witnesses from the chase, including Patrick Cunningham, viewed them one by one. Then came a break in the case. On the 28th of August, at Ealing Police Station, police formally charged Francis George Joseph Marnell, a 39-year-old unemployed man from Northolt who was suffering from schizophrenia and well-known serious mental health problems, with Jean's murder. It transpired that Marnell had approached police voluntarily after seeing the widespread appeals, stating he believed he might have been in the Acton area that evening waiting for a girlfriend at Acton Town station. He is then interviewed at length about the murder, and when it is put to him that he killed Jean, he reportedly accepted he may have done it, but could not remember due to his mental state, though he doubled down, adamantly denying responsibility overall. After being charged, he is remanded into custody to await trial, and detectives continued compiling their evidence against him before submitting the full file to the Crown Prosecution Service in preparation for proceedings. However, on November 12th, at a committal hearing at Ealing Magistrates Court, the magistrate directed that Francis Marnell would be cleared of the murder charge due to insufficient evidence to proceed for trial. It came to light that while 2 witnesses, including Carpenter Patrick Cunningham, had picked Marnell out of an identity lineup, with Cunningham spending some 8 minutes studying Marnell before picking him, the defense counsel highlighted the fact that 4 other witnesses had instead selected 2 completely different individuals, casting reasonable doubt on the reliability of the CPS's identity parade witness evidence. More crucially, however, Marnell possessed a strong alibi. A church-going friend named Joan Brown had come and testified on his behalf that Marnell had been with a group of 7 friends from his church praying with them inside a flat he shared with another friend in Chiswick between 6 to 10 p.m. on the night of the murder. Defense solicitor Tim Green publicly condemned the handling of the case, declaring that both the police and the CPS had been fully aware of this unimpeachable alibi, yet had pressed ahead with the charge regardless. He also highlighted the fact that there was no physical evidence nor DNA tying Marnell to the murder. Marnell's friends and supporters present in the court cheered as he was released from custody and declared a free man. The decision to go ahead with this charge drew fierce criticism from the press and certain local politicians, who argued that charging Marnell had potentially diverted resources and allowed genuine suspects to escape scrutiny. And the residents of Carbery Avenue expressed profound outrage, furious that the man who had shattered their once safe neighborhood and murdered Jean remained at large, free to possibly strike again. In the wake of the collapsed case, detectives openly admitted their deep disappointment and acknowledged that they had reached a frustrating dead end with the case, but they pledged to redouble their efforts starting the very next morning back at the station. And soon after the acquittal, the police rolled out a renewed media campaign pleading for fresh information from the public, yet no new significant leads would ever materialize. And by March 1994, the active investigation had ground to a halt. Over the preceding months, officers had taken 1,800 statements, responded to more than 1,000 calls to the incident room, and systemically traced, interviewed, and eliminated 342 suspects. Although the case had gone cold, detectives maintained that it remained officially open and that they would continue to welcome any new information that might emerge. In May 1997, a major new initiative, Operation Enigma, was launched. Enigma is a dedicated task force charged with re-examining more than 200 unsolved murders across southeast England, specifically probing whether a single serial killer might be responsible for a string of fatal stabbings targeting women and children. Among the cases reviewed were those of Penny Bell, Jean Bradley, Rachel Nichol, and Lynn Russell, along with her daughter, Megan, all victims who had died from multiple stab wounds and blunt force injuries. Detectives also sought to have the non-victim's blood sample collected from the crime scene retested and checked against the National DNA database, though it is unclear what the results of these tests were. The case once again disappeared into the annals of silence until December 2008, after Robert Napper was convicted of the manslaughter of Rachel Nichol, whose 1992 murder in Wimbledon Common he had finally admitted to following DNA evidence that exonerated the wrongly convicted Colin Stagg. The Metropolitan Police detectives then set about re-interviewing the notorious serial killer and rapist about several other unsolved, frenzied knife murders dating back to the early 1990s. Napper, already confined indefinitely at Broadmoor Hospital for the 1993 double murder of Samantha Bissett and her 4-year-old daughter Jasmine, was questioned specifically in connection with the killings of Penny Bell, Jean Bradley, and Claire Tiltman. Investigators noted clear similarities to Napper's established pattern: the frenzied, motiveless nature of the stabbings, their timing in the early 1990s, and their geographic proximity in the West and South East London, Kent region. Ultimately, however, no credible evidence connected him to any of these crimes, particularly the detailed witness descriptions from the Jean Bradley chase, which did not align with Napper's appearance, as well as no DNA or physical evidence linking him, which prompted police to formally clear him of any involvement. The Metropolitan Police continues to classify the case as open and unsolved, yet no fresh appeals, significant developments, or public updates have been issued in many years. Jean Bradley was more than a name in a cold case file. She was a vibrant, loving woman whose life was cut short in an instant of senseless violence. A devoted partner dreaming of marriage after 21 years, a passionate gardener who had found joy in every bloom, a successful professional who had flown with royalty and built a career on kindness and competence, and a neighbor whose warmth made her street feel like home. May this story serve as a quiet tribute, not just to the horror of what happened on Carbery Avenue that March evening, but to the light she brought into the world, a light that no darkness could ever fully extinguish. Rest in peace, Jean, your story is not forgotten. Thank you for watching and listening to Jean's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.